Well, that's age management is an interesting concept that, really we've been throwing around for the last 20 years, whether it's anti-aging medicine, longevity, age management. There are people that prefer that term. And it really is all the same. It means what can we do about the changes that we're feeling physically, physiologically, biochemically? There's a lot going on that we just ignore. And, one day, particularly for guys, we wake up and it's like, that's not working as well today. What the heck's going on? Well, it started at age 30, losing 1 to 3% of your hormones a year. And so when we intercede and do things, to help change our bodies biochemically, physically, everything's different. I always refer to our hormones as our wireless system, and that's a pretty good analogy of, how our cells talk to each other, and that's through chemical messengers. And so without them, things just don't work right. Okay. And so probably, whatever the age range is that you personally may start feeling different. Used to be 20 years ago, I saw men and women in their 50s and 60s. And then as another decade went by, it was mid 40s. Now I have dozens of men and women in their 30s, 40s. There are a lot of environmental factors going on, BPA compounds, estrogenic compounds, things, chemicals, glyphosate, toxins, things that are bombarding, our system. And so from our immune system to cellular function to certainly, again, hormones, then which affects muscle mass, body composition, brain health, everything. And so we start as a sports medicine physician, we start with proper diet, exercise, all the things that we've done as a young athlete into middle age and beyond, but stop seeing the same results. It's like, gee, I just don't feel right in the gym, or I'm sore longer, or I can't seem to build muscle mass. And so long story short, that's kind of where the term age management comes in is, all right, what can we do to slow down this process? What can we do to reverse the process? And for me, that's really what's most exciting because there are a lot of therapies and things that we can do to help prevent telomere shortening, even lengthen telomeres, the tips of our DNA, and that's what predicts aging. We do a couple of different tests. One is called a GlycanAge test, and that is measuring glycoproteins. Well, what's that? Well, literally sugar coating of your proteins. And so, as I tell people, sugar's the devil. Why? Well, when you have high sugar, and so of course, any physician will check what's called a hemoglobin A1C, a 60-day glucose average. And we want that number to be 5.6 or less. But when it's in the sixes and even higher, then you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. Well, what does that mean? It affects a lot of things on the cellular level. And when you have more sticky proteins, that can accelerate plaque formation, premature heart disease. I tell people cholesterol really doesn't kill anybody. And we're reading more and more all the time. And since RFK Jr. flipped the food pyramid and put, meat and fats back on top, there's a lot of proof to that, we don't need more grains and carbs, which turn into sugars immediately. We need protein and slower metabolizing food sources. And so that's a whole nother topic to get into, but it all goes together. So one, we measure glycoproteins through what's called the GlycanAge test. The other that I do through a company called True Diagnostics is a DNA methylation test that looks at pace of aging, your biologic, both give biologic versus chronologic age, the length of your telomeres, the tips of your DNA. We have three different biologic ages, really. One based on DNA methylation, another based on the pace of aging. The other is related to glycation of proteins, and then the telomere length, the age based on how's your DNA. And so, we want to obviously avoid things in life that cause degradation of all of the above, like oxidative, reactive oxidative species, smoking, nicotine, heavy alcohol, things that accelerate oxidation. As I say, we want to slow down the rust process. And so it is of extreme importance to address all the factors. And so I like to get the full picture when I start with new patients, do one of the biologic age tests, see where we're at. Good, bad, or ugly, it's a baseline. We need to know where it is. And then, but we do know because I see it over and over and over with every patient. When we repeat those tests at a year, 2 year intervals, whatever time frame, works for someone, we see it change. And we want to slow down that pace of aging. We want to be less than 1 to 1. We don't want to age faster, a year and a half for every year we're here. That would not be good. And so, we know that hormone therapy significantly impacts that. And so, under the age management banner, we do a lot of things to one, evaluate where you're at, and two, what can we employ to do that? And obviously, clean eating, clean living, exercise, proper diet, and hormone balance above all else is, to me, the most important factor that we can modify very easily. I like the fact that with the true diagnostic test, and this was the protocols developed at Harvard, some really smart guys are always fine tuning this and changing things. Um, it includes all of that. So we do the true diagnostic test. It runs about $700, so it's not terrible, but it gives us pace of aging, telomere length, biologic, chronologic age, status of our immune system, cardiovascular. So it's literally a book. There is a lot of information, and so I think it is absolutely worth the money. It depends on what symptoms you have or don't have. I didn't used to see 30-year-olds, it was 40s and up. Well, I have many dozens of men and women, particularly with women. It's a decade or two before menopause. Testosterone declines, it affects muscle mass, mood, libido. We're just not interested now, but nothing's changed in the relationship other than what's going on biochemically. And so it's important, I think, to get some baseline blood testing done to see where someone's at. The other thing I see a lot in women, and we'll probably talk about it later, is progesterone. Years before menopause, progesterone declines, common complaint, I can't sleep, I'm moody, yeah, I just don't feel like myself. And so very small amounts in that pre-menopausal and perimenopausal periods do a lot for women. So without measuring and getting a hormone panel, it's just a wild guess because, there's no way to recommend supplements and certainly would never prescribe a hormone without knowing exactly where someone is at. Again, we know that hormone replacement helps to balance all of that. With telomere length specifically, I use a compound called TA65. It's a botanical compound that's been researched and been available for at least the last 15 years. I've used it intermittently over that time period with patients, with taking it personally, and it has been proven to help stop telomere shortening, and in some cases may increase telomere length. The other thing that, we just recently got a new hyperbaric oxygen chamber, a hard-sided chamber that goes to 2 atmospheres, which is almost 60 feet below sea level. We're at 8,000 feet. And so that's a big change for people here. But there are protocols and studies that not only improve collagen in the skin and decrease lines and wrinkles, but have been proven to lengthen telomeres. And so, I have people that are very excited about the fact that we now have that technology. They can come in and, as we say, go for a dive a couple times a week, 2 or 3 times for an hour at a sustained pressure setting with high dose, 100% oxygen. It just really does a lot for brain health, heart health, telomere length, mobilizing stem cells, injury management. I mean, the list of benefits from hyperbaric therapy are very long, not to mention neurodegenerative issues and protective effects with that. Telomeres are the tips of our DNA. And so they're exposed, if you will, and through metabolic processes, stress reactions, oxidative stress, toxins, drugs, alcohol, they can shorten those telomeres, which causes premature aging. I put a lot of people on metformin. You know, there's something called the TRIM study, the word TRIM with two I's. It's been almost 20 years now, and it was studied mice with DHEA, which is a hormone that metabolizes to all our hormones naturally. It's in longevity studies, has anti-cancer benefits. I put everybody, men and women, on DHEA, just different amounts. But that study was with DHEA, growth hormone, and metformin. That's what launched the metformin craze nearly 20 years ago because the mice lived longer. So, as we always say, if it was good for them, it must be good for us. Well, the animal models are pretty accurate. And so we use things like that to help improve insulin sensitivity and insulin production. Probably the greatest thing that's happened in the last 20 years is the GLP-1s from Ozempic, Mounjaro, now Retatrutide, which doesn't quite have its FDA approval yet, but is coming down the pike. Everybody wants to take it, but nobody can legally distribute it yet because of government regulations. But they all do the same thing. They help particularly sensitize tissues and help reverse insulin sensitivity, which comes from a lifetime of eating too much sugar. Eventually, your body makes more and more insulin and finally stops reacting to it. And so, insulin resistance is a really big deal. And the GLP-1s, GLP-2s, and now GLP-3 is retatrutide. They have significant effect on reversing that. So not only decreasing appetite, sometimes decreasing alcohol craving, improving cellular reactions and sensitivity to the what we do have. And so that's kind of the long and short of that. Well, you can look at our website, aspen-regenerativemedicine.com, or give us a call at 970-201-1332. We watching this podcast, we cover a lot of other topics with Beyond the Fountain of Youth, and I cover those in my book as well, which is found pretty easily on Amazon under Beyond the Fountain of Youth. But yeah, call us. We ship kits to people all over the country. We have patients all over the world. Just opened our office in Cabo San Lucas a couple weeks ago. And so, we can usually find a way to accommodate people wherever they live.